Welcome to the Monday episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. We've been teasing a few things online about what this episode is, and it is a huge one for us, huge one for me, because we finally got a chance to speak to Rich Coes, aka Svengoolie, along with our dear friend Bill Leff to talk about the new Svengoolie 45th anniversary comic that is out now. It is a awesome book. There's art by Scott Shaw, Joe Staton, Bill Morrison, Dan Parent, and more. It is funny. It is just a great read altogether. And we got to talk to Svengoolie, guys. I mean, this is top of the bucket list for us. He's a huge comic fan. He's a wonderful person. I want to thank Jim Roach, his producer, for helping put this together, and Bill as well for helping put this together. It was a lot of fun to do. I think you're gonna learn a lot and have a lot of fun listening to it. So, without further ado, Svengoolie, Rich Coes, and Bill Leff. Hey everybody, welcome to a huge episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. I'm Orrin Phillips, and today we have television stars galore. First off, the ingenue of morning cartoons, Mr. Bill Leff, for his 43rd appearance on our show.
I think I broke a record today, didn't I?
It's getting up there.
It's getting close. Good.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
And of course, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Rich Coes, aka Svengoolie. Sir, this is the highest of honors. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, I'm happy to do it. And by the way, Bill broke a record, but I broke a CD this morning. So
Oh, geez.
Much
just to keep
better.
things.
Well, it's we all had a rough morning. But this we're going to talk a little about this comic book, which has come out a couple of weeks ago. Fans are loving it left and right. Let's start at the very beginning. I know Dan DiDio was a big part of this. So, Rich, how did Dan approach you, and what did he say that made you say, "Okay, this is a good idea"?
Well, actually, this goes back to a C2E2 here in Chicago when I happened to be doing an autograph signing, and waiting in line patiently down the line was Dan DiDio, who was a big fan of the show. And we had talked back then, and while he was still with DC, and he wanted to do a Svengoolie comic book with me with the DC heroes, which we did.
Mhm.
And once he had left DC and he was working with Frank Miller, he talked to me again about doing another comic, which we did. The first one, which included the Svenbot and time travel, which was very convoluted. But then that worked out well enough and sold out quickly, so we decided to do another one, and that's this 45th anniversary version of the Svengoolie comic.
Did you ever imagine one day you and Superman would be standing in the same room together?
No, and that's funny because the first comics I liked actually were the old Carl Barks, Donald Duck comics. But then when I got into the DC stuff in the early 60s, I loved Superman and Batman, and to be in the same book with them was really, one of the greatest achievements of my life at this point.
Now, here's just a quick aside because, and I've asked Bill this too, when you're doing these cons, do you ever get 10 minutes to yourself just to walk around and pick up some comics or anything else, or is you just don't have the opportunities for these things?
Most of the time, no, because we're slammed. We're doing the signings, and we try to make sure we take care of everybody who's in line. And then a lot of times we're wandering around shooting stuff for the show, so I don't really get a chance to look around, though I'd love to. Sometimes if I get the chance, I can go there incognito as my secret identity and get a chance to look around. But most of the time, we're so busy when we're there. When we did the New York Comic Con a few years ago, I would have loved to see, there were friends of mine that were there, and I didn't get to see anybody because we spent all the time sitting there and signing.
That makes sense. Now, Bill, this is your second comic book appearance, and
Right.
you had writing duties as well for this one to come up with the story for your character. What was step one for you for putting this story together?
Step one was coming to, because I think I fainted because I'm such a fan of this type of thing. And just to be asked, they always say with the Academy Awards, just to be nominated is such a thrill. But I never believed that until asked me to do this. And like, wow, what to actually write something that's put in comic book form. This is so exciting. And I had that first one I have it here, the one that Rich did with the DC heroes a couple of years back. And I thought, I want to capture that kind of flavor. I want it to be true to what we all do on the show, but with real life superheroes around us. So it was a fascinating process. I loved doing it the first time, and then for this new book, I loved it even more.
Now, was the story we read as fans, was that the original concept you came up with, or were there some changes that went through until we got to where we are right now?
Well, that's not my say. That's kind of the people who put the books together. They kind of figure out what goes where. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. And I know Rich has a hand in that as well, don't you, Rich?
Yes, in fact, I had both hands in it.
Oh, you
Believe
did?
me, that was right. Yes. Yeah, well, we mainly planned out our story, and of course, in the main story in the book, Nostalgiaferatoo also plays a big part in that, since
Mhm.
he's the one that sells me the cursed doorbell that
Hmm.
releases doorbell demons. But
Based on
yeah,
a true
we could.
story, by the way.
Oh, definitely so. We only deal in reality here.
Right, right.
And we broke it down to have each one of our Sven squad members, Gwengoolie and the Imp, and of course Nostalgiaferatoo, each to have their own little story in the book. So it's like an amalgam.
Now, Bill, there's no jealousy of the fact that Alonzo has caught fire and America is talking about him and loving him and, sort of forgetting a little bit about you. But no jealousy on that aspect?
Well, I'm currently looking up the word amalgam because I don't know what it means.
All right.
So give me just a second or two. Um, we've given
It was a TV show, Bill. It was a TV show, Amalgam in the Middle. You
oh,
remember
I
that?
remember amalgam in the middle. You're not the boss of me now. Um, yeah, they've asked me to add a sidekick, and that's where Alonzo the Penguin comes in. And he's not appeared on camera yet, but I think we'll see that in the near future or possibly a little down the line. But yeah, it's just another fun character to bounce things off of. Yeah.
And Rich, for you with this book and the story, what was your starting point for creating, the story that you wanted to put out there?
Actually, it was one of the ideas we had when we were working on the first Sven comic book
Mhm.
that came before this one. I just had a whole list of ideas of things that we might be able to make stories out of. And one of them was the idea of Sven not being able to defeat some, menace and having to recruit other monsters. But of course, the main monsters are too busy to deal with something like that. So we had to get some of the more inferior type ones.
Now, this is an odd question, but Rich, for you, do you look at Sven as a character, or do you see Sven as just another part of your personality?
Well, I think it's both. It's a character, definitely,
Mhm.
but I think my personality is in there, obviously.
Mhm.
Maybe
But,
amplified
but,
a little.
but Rich, wouldn't you agree? Because I've known you for a long, long time. When you're the character, when you're Svengoolie, it open up it opens up a whole new world to you, like things that you wouldn't normally say as Rich. It takes you a half a second to say them as Svengoolie. Don't you find that to be true?
Well, yeah, I think so. It's almost like the whole thing of people putting on Halloween costumes and suddenly having the freedom to act differently or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe sometimes Sven will say things that I normally would not necessarily say.
Now, there's beautiful artwork in this book. In all the books that you've been a part of, art has been a huge part of it. In this one, just to name a few, Dan Parent, Bill Morrison, Scott Shaw, and my personal favorite, because he's one of the nicest people out there, Joe Staten, the living legend, who worked on Bill's story. As a comic fan, and I'll start with you, Bill, having these guys working on your story and your characters, that must be a thrill.
Yeah, Joe and I exchanged emails early on, mostly because my brain doesn't work the way comic books work in that when we're trying to convey an idea in either one box or two boxes or something, I don't know how to play that out. But for Joe and the other artists, it's just second nature. They know immediately when they're hearing a script, because the order that it's done is it's scripted first, and then the authors read the script, the artists read the script and build off of that. And that, because their brains are wired that way, like Joe had no problem at all. He knew from the beginning, this will go here, this will go here, we'll show this, we'll show that. I'm amazed by it.
And Rich, for you, seeing you and your character done by so many different artists, as a comic fan, what kind of thrill is that to see different visions of you, really?
It's pretty amazing, and especially such great artwork. I've always loved Bill Morrison and Scott Shaw's stuff. Uh, Christopher Jones, of course, worked on some of our stuff as well, and he's done a great job. Joe Staten actually had me in Dick Tracy in the Dick Tracy strip, and it's all, to me that's just the ultimate to have all these great artists working on this stuff that about just me, Svengoolie.
And another touch to the book is also the newsprint for the pages inside, the sort of old school feel of it, which as a fan, it just touching it, you're like, oh yes, this is how things were. I thought that was a brilliant idea to put in for this book as well.
Definitely, and it appeals to me too, because as I said, I've still got my early '60s DC comics and such, and people say, "Oh, do you put them in the in the sleeves and everything?" And they are now, but it wasn't like I did that right away because I wasn't going to preserve them. I wanted to read them over and over again,
Right.
and that whole the feel of the books and the smell of that old paper, it just brings back so many memories.
And well, let me just sidetrack for a second because you just mentioned something, bagging and boarding comics now. As a collector, what are your personal thoughts on the grading of comics? Because I know that's sort of, if you're selling books and you're not bringing it into your comic shop graded, a lot of times they don't want, they don't have the time for something like that. What are your thoughts on the whole grading process and how it's sort of taken over the comic book collecting industry?
Well, to me, it doesn't matter because, like I said, I got the books to read
Right.
and to read over and over again. And I've never really brought any of mine in to be graded at all. I know that that's more, I think, for the collectors who are looking towards, selling them in the future, possibly,
Right.
and, making a profit off them. And to me, it's like when I get the books, I know I'm going to keep them. And, maybe it would be interesting to see how much they're actually on the grading scale. But for the most part, that doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And for Bill, you know, can you see yourself doing more of these stories if they come back to you and say, like, this is a big hit, like let's just keep this party train going? Could you see yourself doing more and more?
Oh yeah, it forced me to use the muscle that I didn't know I had. I've been a fan of this genre forever. I mean, I used to have a school bag, and through most of grade school, there was always either comic books in it or wacky packages or both. That was a given. And I wasn't trained to think that way, to divvy up the stories that way. And then once I did it the first time, I went, well, I guess I can do it. And then it got a little easier the second time. And I already in my head have some ideas of some things. I'll actually share one of them with you. I always thought, like with those comic books, if you go to the back, you had ads for sea monkeys and you had ads for grit seeds. I don't know if you remember those, but if you sold enough seeds, they'd sell you a race car set. They'd send it to your house, whatever. And I thought it'd be really fun to parody some of those ads in the back, So I've kind of made some notes for that.
And sort of, this one's for both of you, and it's a nerdy question even for me, but when you're writing humor in comics, you want this humor to appeal to a broader audience. How do you choose what you think would you find funny, but also what you think the readers and the fans would find funny too?
Go on, Rich. This
Well,
is yours.
who, me? Yeah.
Yeah.
What it seems like the same way that I write the stuff for the show, what I'm writing usually is stuff that I and the people I'm working with will find funny.
Right.
And basically that's what I'm aiming at is that, which obviously it seems to appeal to a pretty wide demographic since we have, everyone from little kids to senior citizens watching the show. Basically, I do what I do, and I just hope that it will appeal to a wide range of people.
And it has done that for 45 solid years. So let's hope that there's at least 45 more to go.
Oh boy.
And what about you, Bill?
We'll ask the question again because I want to make sure I get the answer right to the question.
When you're writing humor, with this book, you
Yeah,
wanted to reach a general audience. How do you sort of pick and choose what you think, not only what you'll find funny, but
right.
someone just picking this book up randomly might say, oh, well, okay, I get what he's talking about.
I assumed when writing the comic book, I assumed they might have a slight knowledge of my character, of Nostalgiaferatoo. So I throw in little bits and pieces, little hints as to who he is and why he's there. When I write the segments with Rich, which by the way are like one of the highlights of my professional career, is doing these bits with Rich. I know this will sound strange, and I hope you both appreciate this, but I'm writing for the Jack Benny show. I'm not writing for a show that exists today. The pacing of the segments with Rich are so incongruent with the segments from the old Jack Benny show. The pacing is there, so it's a different style of writing, but it's certainly one that meshes. It's just approaching the situations and the jokes from a slightly different angle.
I have to say, Bill, I've always loved the Jack Benny stuff too. And I always liked the way that there would be, 5 lines later, a callback to another punchline.
Yeah.
And that exactly works so well. And I've always, aspired to add that kind of flavor to some of the stuff that I do as well.
Oh, it's so there.
Mhm. And Rich, as a big fan of the show, when I see you do the segments on the road and you're at the comic conventions, and it's sort of a two-part thing because you as a fan get to meet these awesome comic legends, George Perez, Alex Ross. I mean, the list goes on and on. But on the flip side, they're so excited to meet you. I mean, they can't believe that they're getting a chance to speak to you. What's that experience like when you get to have those sort of encounters?
It pretty much amazes me, being such a big fan of all these people. And then to hear that, they actually, first of all, even know who I am,
Mhm.
but the fact that they're fans is amazing. We've run into people that I never expected. We ran into Mark Ruffalo,
Mhm.
and he immediately recognized me, and I was just stunned. He said, "Yeah, I and my dad used to always watch you every weekend in Kenosha." And it just shocked me that people at these high levels of show business and comic book art are fans of what we do.
Rich, I was listening to Howard Stern's show the other day, and you got a very nice mention. And I thought to myself, not only did Rich get a nice mention out of Howard Stern, but he didn't even take any time to explain exact. It was just assumed if you're listening to me, you're certainly going to know who Svengoolie is. There was no, here's who he is and what he's been doing. And I thought, boy, that's the sure sign of making it when you can mention a guy and not even give the background. Just say, here's Svengoolie. That's it.
I wasn't even aware of that. This
Oh
this
yeah.
happened recently.
Yeah, it
Wow.
was it was Vladimir Putin's birthday, and he was doing Vladimir Putin's voice, and they were talking about which celebrities would and wouldn't come to his party. And he goes, "What about Svengoolie? Will he come to my party?" They're like, "No, he's busy. He can't."
I know Richard Christie, who works on that show, is a big fan, and
Yeah.
he's been in touch a few times. We even did a Halloween special with him for, I think it was for Sirius XM a couple of years ago.
Oh, that's great. That's so cool.
Now, you guys are sort of entering what I like to call the Mark Hamill trifecta, which is you have action figures, now you have comics, you're one step away from trading cards. Once you have that, the pyramid is complete.
It's like
Uh,
the EGOT. It's almost an EGOT.
I was going to say, for us collectors fans, it would just be an absolute dream. Um, Bill, I know you were a big toy collector.
Yeah.
I think the world knows that. Do you own Svengoolie action figures?
Well, not to embarrass anybody here live on TV, but I keep it close to my desk and close to my heart.
But you lost the hat.
Well, the hat just fell off. It's here somewhere.
The
Yeah.
hats don't really fit the figure real easily. You have to kind of really cram them down.
But
onto
Rich,
the
I've
head.
noticed that hats
course.
don't fit you. I've tried to put hats on you when you're sleeping, and I can't keep them on.
I know, yeah, and you try to cram them down, that gives me a terrible headache. So in the
I'll
future, would you
stop.
please try that?
Rich, if you need me to call the police about this, just blink a few times and I'll dial
No,
911.
just call Sting. You don't need all the police.
A common question that, and I've asked this of Bill as well, because you guys are a generation or so ahead of me. But when you were collecting comics, Marvel having someone like Stan Lee, someone out there taking interviews, just out and about, and DC, they had the big names. They had, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. But did them not having a live figurehead affect your comic buying situation?
But not necessarily, just because, again, I was a fan of the characters.
Mhm.
But the whole thing with Marvel and having Stan there and Stan's soapbox and all the rest of that stuff,
Mhm.
it had a totally different feel than the DC stuff, because you felt like, here's this one guy that's guiding all this stuff here and supposedly writing it all and creating these characters, though I know we know better now. It really gave it a different feel, because for the longest time I had no idea who the DC artists even were, because they never really would list them.
Mhm.
And especially back in the 60s, I had no idea who was writing the books or anything. The main thing was like Bob Kane in the Batman books. And at that point, I don't know how much he was actually even doing.
That's a very good point. If you were to put together a dream team of a writer and an artist to do a comic about you, who would that team be?
Is that
Wow.
for Rich? I
Writer.
hope. Yeah. Go on, Rich.
Both of you,
I'd have Bill write it.
obviously.
Wow, that's a good question, since I've mostly written the stuff myself. Um, I'm not really sure who would do it. As far as art, my friend Alex Ross always loved his stuff, and we had some false starts on doing stuff together. But I'd certainly enjoy seeing him work on the artwork.
And
For me, it would be the artist would be Carmen Infinito.
Infantino.
Oh yeah,
Nope, Infinito. It's one of my
because he
neighbors.
lives forever.
Oh yes. Now the pieces are coming together.
Carmen Infinito? Am I saying it wrong? I've been saying it wrong my whole life if I said it wrong.
I'm impressed for both of us.
And the writer would be Michael Bublé.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You
And
did,
it would only be sung. It would never be spoken. It would only be sung.
would you
So
have
sort of like the Joker movie.
Yes, but with an audience. That's all. That's the only difference.
Cubs first baseman Leon Durham would be the anchor?
Yeah, we get the bull.
Yeah. Just get the
Yep.
whole team together. That makes sense. So, you guys having any cons coming up, appearances coming up to meet with fans?
Right now we're doing our usual Halloween stuff.
Mhm.
For example, this Saturday, I don't know when you're going to actually release this or if it'll have escaped instead. But on Saturday, we're doing the Nightmare on Chicago Street in Elgin, which is really great. It's got the whole concept that Elgin has been taken over by zombies, and the main downtown area is the safe zone.
Mhm.
And it's just an amazing time. It's great. And I get to sign autographs and then go on stage for the costume contest. And then the Saturday before Halloween, I'll be at the Volo Auto Museum, another place that I've done every single year for many years now, and signing autographs there. They did it a different way this year and sold tickets to make sure people would get there. And they limited the number of tickets, and it sold out, I think, the very first day. So I'm very flattered by that.
And Oren, if I may, I want to point out Rich is far too modest to mention this himself. He just got a very, very nice honor in Las Vegas not long ago.
Oh.
Should I elaborate on that?
Ooh,
You know, Joe Bob Briggs,
of
the
course.
very famous Shudder star and horror movie expert. He invited us to be part of his Joe Bob's World Drive-In Jamboree in Las Vegas, which was actually held at a drive-in theater on the outskirts of Las Vegas. And he invited me to be there. He wanted to do a whole night, and I do mean a whole night, all night, of Universal classics. And he also presented me with a Lifetime Achievement Award, which he calls the Hubby Award because it's actually on a hubcap. And obviously, I told him that means if I keep going for another 130 something years, I'll get the entire set.
Well, congratulations on that. Well deserved.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it was a great night. The only thing is, I'm at the point in my life where doing all-nighters is not something that I plan on doing too often. And especially, out in the makeup and all, in the Las Vegas heat during the time when they were having record hot temperatures, that was quite an experience.
And you stayed for 6 movies, didn't you, Rich?
Yeah, I stayed for 5, and we introduced the 6th one. But at that point, I knew I was losing altitude and
Yeah.
had to say goodbye.
And they put you up at Slots of Fun, which is a really nice hotel. That's great.
Yes, the slot machines there work on slugs alone, so it's pretty exciting.
And Bill, you'll be at the Burger King parking lot signing napkins for
Yeah, that's tonight, one night only. Bring in a napkin, get a napkin free. I'll sign them all.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, Rich, there are top 5 books, favorites of yours all time, comic books.
Oh, sure. I'm a big fan of Kingdom Come.
Okay.
I've got, a compendium of George Perez stuff, including his Wonder Woman stuff, which I really like. Let's see. A lot of the Neil Adams Batman stuff. I really enjoyed that. Superman, I go back to Kurt Swan, and I always was a fan of his stuff. And as far as the last one, I'd have to say, Bill's going to be mad at me, Carmen Infantino and his Flash stuff. He was an infant, and his name was Tino. It sounds like a Barry Manilow song. His name is Infant. His name is
He
Tino.
was a Tino. Did you ever have that moment where you realize you've been saying somebody's name wrong for 50 years?
You mean like
can't believe
Oh,
it.
sure. Yeah.
Wow. It reminds me of my friend Sonny and Cher. I did the same thing with them.
Now, Rich, with Superman, did you ever venture off the path and read the Lois Lane and the Jimmy Olsen books, or did you just stick with just Superman?
Yeah, no, I had all of them. All the Superman related stuff. I was really into it. And the Jimmy Olsen stuff was always kind of out there, I would say. Him becoming the giant turtle man and that type of stuff. And the Lois Lane stuff, I don't think I was really into as much for, the romantic angle of it, but just the fact that it was Superman and she was, interacting with him. I think actually I liked Lana Lang better anyway.
I'll tell you a quick Jimmy Olsen thing. My friend calls him the Ginger Oaf, but I've read one story and suddenly he knows like Kung Fu and he's taking down this, I don't know if it was a KKK sort of gang by himself. And I'm saying, this is the guy with the camera saying, Mr. Clark, Mr. Kent, Mr. Kent. And now he's doing all this. I just couldn't get my head around that one.
Yeah, well, there was a big change, I think, in his personality when they started the series of Jack Kirby doing the Jimmy Olsen and Superman stuff. And he no longer was, falling off a building, hitting his watch so it went ZZZ, and, making mistake after mistake that Superman had to save him from. It became a much more dramatic sort of thing. And I think he did move more in the direction of being an action hero in those.
Hmm. Now, do you still collect newer books today or just older stuff from then?
I like to get, the big compendiums of them, the anthology type ones. I don't really get a chance to go to comic stores that often these days. And be honest, I don't get to keep up on all the current books.
Mhm.
But when I do, I enjoy reading them. They're still important to me. I always felt that one of the ways I learned to write things was from comic books because I learned, how a story was formulated
Mhm.
and, the ways that you could make everything connect. And it was an educational process for me.
That's awesome. And Bill, I know you're more of a toy guy, but you ever pick up a comic book here and there on your
Oh
venture?
yeah, yeah, definitely. And the ones that appealed to me the most were always, for some reason, I liked the ones that were individual, but I really liked the group ones. I have a bunch of the Justice League from the late 60s and the early 70s. And I went back and read them a couple of years ago. And, the writing, let's be honest, is a little stilted some of the time. But I just liked the idea of all these great superheroes working together for a common cause. And, I think you and I spoke about this maybe the first time we spoke, Oren. There was something about the covers of these. I know they say you can't judge a book by its cover, but with comic books, they would give you this fantastic scene on the cover, like it would be a billiards table and Lex Luthor would be ready to break, and there was a superhero that would perish wherever the ball was hit, that they fell down the hole. And I go, I can't wait to get to that. And then it was nowhere to be found in the book. They fooled me every single week.
Well, that's like, you see Captain America about to fight Daredevil, and you're like, oh my gosh, how's this going to end? And it's a
Yeah.
minor little argument between the two of them. And then
Yeah.
suddenly they're working together, and you're like, you guys didn't even raise your voices. Like, you just did the old bait and switch on me.
Right. But we fell for it every week.
Oh,
It's
of
the weirdest
course.
thing. You'd think at some point we'd go, enough of this. You can't fool me again, DC or Marvel. Now every week.
Well, gentlemen, I just want to say, hey, congratulations on this and 45 years for you, Rich. You brought so much to us as fans, and we thank you so much for all that you've done for us.
Well, thank you. That's very nice to hear. And I think one of the reasons that I've kept doing this is just because of statements like that. When I go and do my appearances, people come up and they thank me, and they thank me for still doing this and for, the laughs that I've given them. And that means a lot to me. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm still continuing to do it, even into this, my old age.
And
And
if I can add to that, Oren, if you read our fan pages, and what you need to do is set aside a month or two and read these fan pages. They write the nicest things, but they always say, it looks like you and Rich are having such a good time when you're shooting your parts. And that doesn't even begin to tell the story. I mean, it's so funny. I can't tell you how many times we have to do things over because I can't not laugh. If something makes me laugh, I can't stop. So
Yeah, it's the same thing with me. Working with Bill is such a pleasure, and we often don't even have to write anything. We can
yeah.
just ad lib segments, and it's great. I think Bill and I have known each other for quite a long time, and our senses of humor have intersected, and it's always a pleasure. I love working with Bill. And it's great when he does make me laugh. People always comment on that I'm at the, very edge of breaking up when I do the bits with him. He's got such a quick mind, and it's always fun. It's always fun to work with
Oh,
him.
thank you, Rich. I feel the same. Thank you.
yeah, and one request from my daughter, if she wants to know if you could bring back the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T. She is the one fan of that movie.
Exactly. She is the one
The
fan of
one
that movie. When we when we ran that, we got piles and piles of hate mail and emails. People did not really appreciate it. And let's face it, even Dr. Seuss himself did not appreciate it because of the way that it was produced and the fact that they cut many of the songs that he had written. And I think that might be a thankful thing. It's very hard to take. And I tell her I'm very sorry, but someday maybe Bill will host it, and
Yes.
it'll be Nostalgiaferatoo's, 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T.
Well, I'm looking forward to Labyrinth, so that should be fun.
Coming soon.
Yeah, that's being done actually by Bill and the other members of the Sven squads. So
Oh,
it's going to be really nice. It's nice. They get to be in charge and do all the parts of the show. So I think I'm going to be watching for that too.
and you make any smart cracks about David Bowie's attire in that, Bill? You
Nuh-uh.
must have words.
Not a one. Don't you worry.
Jareth is cool.
Oh yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time today. And this has been an absolute honor. So thank you again. And we are back. Yeah, guys, same outfit. I just recorded right after we spoke now because I just was so excited. I just wanted to put this all together. What a blast, guys. What a blast. Rich, funny guy, very nice guy. Bill, we love him. Bill's just the absolute coolest out there. And to talk about, you know, the comic books and this book and how it all got together with a guy like Svengoolie, Rich is absolutely phenomenal. So we're very proud. I hope you guys are excited about it. I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. Halloween's coming up. The Svengoolie 40th anniversary Halloween Bonanza is still going on MeTV. Check it out every Saturday. Sundays even have different things going on. It's just a lot of fun. So thank you, Rich. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Jim, for helping set this up. And thank you guys for listening. And we will see you next time.